Welcome everyone to this session on resilience and our corporate world. Never, at least to our known history, resilience as a term would have been as important as what it is today. And I've got with me three very experienced professionals who are on the podcast to talk about this, share experiences, and also give us some tips on how we can use this opportunity to learn new skills and be resilient in our own lives and in our corporate cultures. So I've got with me Renu Mishra. She's leader MENA for Lixil, and she's been uh, a very experienced professional with 25 plus years of experience in different facets of business strategy and financial management. She works for Grohe in the Middle East, Levant, North and West Africa, Turkey and Israel region, and she's based out of Dubai. I've also got with me Ashish Gupta, who's Deputy Managing Director at Texmaco Rail and Engineering Limited. Ashish is a graduate in electrical engineering from IIT Roorkee and did a general management program from XLRI and then from CEDEP INSEAD, France. Again, he's extremely trained on operations, maintenance technologies, safety, SPC, and TQM, and he's worked both in India and abroad. He's worked with the Tata Group before he joined Texmaco as the Deputy MD. And I've got Siddharth Nigam with me, who's National Managing Partner, Clients and Market for Grant Thornton Bharat. Siddharth also has more than 20 years of experience in investment banking and strategic consulting across India and UK. He's also worked across industries in his experience and brings in a wealth of expertise to this conversation. So thank you very much for joining in, Renu, Ashish, and Siddharth. I'll want to start by asking a question to all three of you. Renu, you can go first. On what does resilience mean or look like in the corporate world for you?
Hi everyone, and thank you for the introduction, Sanjay. I think for me personally, and that's the belief probably which I carry in the corporate world also, is resilience is manifold, right? It's belief in your own self. I mean, that's what I see is very critical. It's trust in your own dreams or goals. It's also commitment to make them a reality. I mean, make your dreams come true, but also the courage to see through the end of it, right? So I think it's really a hot pot of all, and just being true to the season of Olympics right now, which is happening. I would say that its ability to remove the dust when you fall and you begin to run again. So keeping your eye on the gold, even if it seems distant, right? So I think for me, resilience as a personal experience and being a professional for the last 2 decades plus means all of it.
Wonderfully expressed, Renu. Ashish, can I have your thoughts around this?
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. And see, I'll take this from my experience of managing supply chains, and I have a very simple take on this subject, which is managing uncertainties with reliability. Actually, is what I would put resilience in my definition, because see, while the world has been focused for a very long time on managing being reliable, uncertainties around us have led to this requirement of resilience coming in into the corporate life. And I completely endorse Renu's views on the example of sports which he gave. That definitely is a human spirit of resilience, which is extremely vital for businesses. I would just like to add one more facet, which is basically resourcefulness. That feeling of resource myopia should not be there. When I talk of resilience. So that is my take on the subject.
Wonderful. Siddharth?
Yeah, thanks, Sanjay. I think, I would just supplement what Renu and Ashish have said. So, resilience is more around in my view, consistency of behavior. We all are very, performance driven and outcome driven, but behavior is a very important element in the corporate world that defines, how resilient you are. So there are ups and downs, changing in environment. And I think the second dimension to resilience is an ability to reinvent yourself. And I think that's, again, very elegantly put by Renu about, when you fall down, just get up, wipe the dust, and, move on to, trying again. So that is how reinvention happens. And those two things. And I think finally, again, I would use the word tenacity, which is an ability to, stay, an ability to persist also is an important element around being resilient in the, in a corporate environment.
Very good. That gives me lots of very interesting perspectives around the topic of resilience. So, Ashish, I'll go with you first on this question. You work with the Tata Group, now you're working with Texmaco. Tata Group has been a great organization if one was to associate this word resilience with. Some of your experiences, what does resilience look like? What does an organization do, or what are traits that it displays? For all of us to understand, the context of this word to the corporate environment that we work with.
See, if you have read, Tata's always spoke about leadership with trust. And I think that is the most important element if you want to build a resilient organization, is to trust your people. And, it's not only about the Tata Group where I worked earlier, it's also about the company where I am. It's also an 80-year-old company. And, and this is the basic thread which runs across an organization, is basically, if you don't trust your people, you can't expect them to be resilient, because, people have to be challenged all the time, and that challenge has to come from within. The organization can only do so much to challenge people to be, to reinvent themselves and to, take a knock, fall down, come back again fighting. So it is something which is inherent in people, and that culture of trust has to be built across the organization, which I think is the most important element of building a resilient organization. Does it answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you. Renu, from your work experience, if you were to talk about some stories of resilience that you've encountered, or any other example that you think fits in, that'll be great.
I think I would really agree with the culture of trust, because if you see last 1.5 year, and I'm talking about the region where I am in the Middle East. Besides COVID, there have been so many macroeconomic conditions. There were blasts in Lebanon, and today we are actually remembering people who lost their lives there. And there have been, conflicts in Iraq. There have been so many other, issues and concerns which came up, which also disrupted life besides COVID. And when I'm talking about it, I'm talking about the entire workforce, right? So a lot of people lost lives, they lost their family members, lost jobs, could not get back, right? So I think in these scenarios, organizations like us also have that responsibility to be right standing besides your teams. Because we said that it's very easy to, say that, get up, dust everything and start running again, and you should have courage. But courage is also about the circle that you can lean in. So your organization, your family, your friends, everybody is part of that circle. You have to make sure that you're enabling that. So there are a lot of things that we did last year, right? So obviously there was work from home. There were flexible hours for people, but there were situations where people just could not work because of any of the circumstances of their family being hospitalized, they being hospitalized, or any of these circumstances. Right standing besides them, behind them, supporting them emotionally, financially, to make sure that they can get back to work was also very important. And yes, there are business results. Yes, there are costs, but that's what the culture is all about. Because it's not about only thinking that your employees would, spring back to action after adversity, but you also enabling that. I think for me, that was emotional, overwhelming, and I would say in the end, with great business results that we had last year, I would say that it got my team also very motivated. So motivation also comes from positive actions. So I would say that Sanjay, it was overall a mixed bag of a year, but a lot of things to cherish after the year passed.
That's a wonderful thought. A lot of people coming together to help each other was a trait which definitely saw all of us through. Siddharth, you have worked in consulting for a very long period of time and have so many stories from your work that you've done. So I'll request you to share some of these examples about corporates which have shown resilient behavior across a very long period of time.
Absolutely. So, Sanjay, let me just start by giving a couple of more recent examples from my organization. Consulting as an offering is discretionary for our clients. So obviously, like everybody else in the same business, there was an expected, I would say, reduction in business. As a company, when we saw this, something that worked very well for us, we had actually invested on our culture, and I talked about behavior. We did a culture journey where values such as how big a team you're playing on, assuming positive intent, and things about succeeding together as a team were ingrained into our people. So when the crisis hit, we actually took on philosophy of people before profit, and actually as in a partnership, the partners came together and said that we'll make sure not a single person loses their job and nobody takes a salary cut. Now, to enable that, if as owners of the business, we have to absorb that hit, we were happy to do that. And, I think that brought us together as an organization, and the year actually went off very well for the organization. So that's more, closer to home. But if I talk about, one company that I really admire is Microsoft. And Microsoft, while is not as passionately associated by people when choosing tech companies, it is an organization that in its journey of 40 odd years has reinvented itself every 4 or 5 years to show how resilient they are as an organization. What started as an operating system company, then got into software, from there into networking, internet, gaming, and today is focusing on cloud and enterprise applications. So over the journey as a leader, whether it's Bill Gates or folks who've been part of the leadership team, they have continuously reinvented themselves to be to create an institution which is resilient from what happens. And I think if we go back further out and we look at groups and businesses which have again survived, General Electric being one, where they had an amazing journey under a very, very dynamic leader, and then saw that some of their businesses actually went out of the trends on the demand side, shrunk. They've stepped back, looked at restructuring their business, looking at realigning what their strengths are to fight another day. I mean, businesses which have been around for 150, 200 years have done that consistently by investing in their culture, by not giving up, by what I would say undertaking either softer damage control to major surgeries, but with a spirit that they want to live to fight another day, because that's what institutions are all about.
Those are great stories, Siddharth. So Siddharth, continuing with this thing, when you've talked about a little bit about what you guys did, but there's always a challenge that we face because resilience requires us to, recover very quickly from a crisis. And we always, many organizations which are large want people to follow a certain process, and those processes become very rigid for all of us. How do you build these processes, or how do you manage these processes so that when there is a time, they become flexible enough to support the new way of working under the crisis? So you guys are doing a lot of work around processes for organizations. If you can talk about, how do you build a process which is flexible when it needs to be, and some examples from there.
So Sanjay, I think by definition, a process should not be flexible, because then, there is no point of having a process. I think where you design the system and the processes is to, what I would create at an organizational level, a fail-safe environment that if you are in a crisis, you can actually have defined processes also to what to do in that crisis, not necessarily to solve the crisis, but how do some of the processes then, take a backseat, or the authority matrix changes in certain scenarios. I mean, it's almost like when the, President of the United States is missing in action, it's the vice president or the, chief of staff who takes over running the country. So you plan for a crisis, you plan for disaster. So now I'll go down the path very simply on something very specific, which is very topical, which is cyber threat. Cyber threat was really something for either companies which are very, very tech driven, or for financial services company. And, cyber security was not really utmost priority for other businesses, brick and mortar businesses. But now, with technology and automation being the backbone of even manufacturing companies, today, every organization, every individual is prone to a cyber attack. How do you address risk management? If you go back 20 years ago, you spent 75 cents to a dollar on protecting yourself from cyber risk, and 25% on dealing with the aftermath of a cyber attack. Now it's the other way around. You do 25 cents in protection, but you allocate more, because it is not if it will happen, it's a matter of when it will happen. So it's also a paradigm shift on association of risk to your business, which you address through reallocating your priorities on risk management, looking at having disaster recovery plans, business continuity processes in play. You design your processes in such a manner that you're actually a fail-safe environment where it's actually people who often, when they make a mistake, they want to maybe cover it up, because so when you create a fail-safe environment, I think you're more likely, and I think it's a part of that's the connection between your culture and your process, that people feel comfortable on highlighting a risk to the business or something that's gone wrong, which can be addressed early enough, as opposed to waiting for a process to discover it. I don't know, Sanjay, whether that gives you color around.
Sure. And we can add more, examples to it to build on it. So Renu, one of the things for resilience under circumstances like this is to have financial backing, right? So given this experience that we've had, if an organization doesn't have the financial resourcefulness, it becomes difficult to do many other things that we want to do and remain resilient. What would you advise companies to do going forward, so that if we are hit with another situation like this, how do they manage their financials differently than how they've been doing today?
I think it is really also industry driven, right? For example, all the manufacturing companies were still hit hard, whichever part of the world they were producing it in, right? For example, the companies who had factories or, let's say, assembly lines in China were obviously directly hit because China was hit the first. But then later on, even if you had manufacturing facilities outside China, your vessels and your availability of ships was hit. So in that format, Sanjay, the whole world will be interconnected. So you can have a business assumption plan, but then they can be obviously something which comes out, which is outside the script. So what I definitely believe in is that there has to be first and foremost the safety of people, and then safety of assets, right? So these are two things that there has to be working hand in hand for any organization. And in short term, it must have meant for many companies to chew losses, which was not forecasted. What it does then prove is that a long consistent performance in the past would have enabled so many organizations to take those decisions, to be able to protect their teams and their assets, and having to go forward to make sure that they could, let's say, write off these 6 months or 4 months as poor business. But if the business did not have that ability because, let's say, they were not consistent profits or revenues, it can be a very tough call. And that's why we saw so many young entrepreneurial businesses going down, right? And that was not very kind, because a lot of people who quit very big corporate careers to start, let's say, their consulting firms, cafes, any other passion that they wanted to pursue. And in the last 1.5 to 2 years would have been such a big test of time and finances on them. I mean, this is really an example of resilience. You would want them to come back, right? You would want them to come back in business. So that's where the second step should be, that the large businesses should be able to support these small businesses or small individuals, let's say, to come back. For example, I mean, if I was running an office cafeteria with a very renowned brand, I would say that, okay, for the next 6 months, let me start moving it to somebody who's an entrepreneurial cafe to give him or her business to bounce back into business. It's a very conscious effort. I mean, it might just seem that, I mean, how does it help you? But, probably most of us work for corporates, where the corporates would have helped themselves because they're large manufacturers, they have those provisions, they know how to run their financials, and probably they can hold on to some bit of low revenue and, let's say, not so profitable P&Ls. But for them, for the mid and the smaller, it's very important. So how are we creating an ecosystem to do that? Because beyond the business resumption plan of our organizations, we have to take the whole environment, the whole ecosystem with us. That's what I believe.
It's a wonderful thought of supporting entrepreneurship, because a lot of people who have been in that journey have got impacted by this crisis. So that's a wonderful thought. Ashish, you mentioned this very interesting thing about managing uncertainty with reliability. And you've done a lot of work around supply chain, and Renu also mentioned the crisis that we've seen. How do organizations build this reliability? How do they ensure that under these kind of situations, they can manage the disruptions that have happened? So you have some great stories and thoughts around that. We would like to hear from you.
Sure. So, when I mentioned managing uncertainties with reliability, this means that organizations need to look at data which is much beyond the supply chains that they operate in. For example, an auto company looking at an auto component supplier, sitting somewhere, some part of the globe. And typical thing is to keep checking, how much did we produce yesterday, how much was shipped yesterday, what is in transit, and therefore, can I run my line for the next, 2 weeks, etc., etc. Now, this has been the traditional way of looking at it. But if you go forward from now, we have so much of data and so much of technology which is available, with the users. For example, you could look at, in the same geography, you could look at weather patterns, political situation, some unrest happening somewhere, the weather en route, etc. A lot of micro level data, a lot of macro level data, and good usage of technology, basically AI or ML or whatever, to develop algorithms which can predict failures much before they actually happen, so that you can take preemptive action. So a production line shutting down, no production happening is a no-brainer. Everybody knows it's happened. But predicting that 3 months down the line, I see that there's going to be a strike, or there's going to be, because of this political unrest somewhere, this factory may get impacted. So I know of companies which monitor some 40, 50 macroeconomic parameters around their supply chains. And they are actually using a lot of technology to predict in advance, as to what disruptions can happen. So that is, one way of dealing with the uncertainty part, because and it is a self-learning tool you can develop to actually do this. This could actually be, large corporates would do it on their own, but this could, in itself be a very huge business line for people who want to offer it as a service. So, that is one way of dealing with it. I know of companies which are doing it now, and it all started with the, when Toyota had a problem because of the floods in Thailand, and there was an auto component disruption all across the world. So a lot of these things today get into this, and today climate change is a big issue, and what amount of disruptions it can cause, nobody knows. So this is how I think organizations should equip themselves to deal with it in future.
Great.
Yeah.
Renu, one of the things that we've all experienced is at personal levels, a lot of employees, a lot of professionals losing their jobs today. And also, one of the things that we see happening is that the way we've been working, the skills that mattered, there seems to be a significant change that we are experiencing in the skills that we need to bring to the table to remain employed. What will be your advice to all these people who have lost jobs, where industries are not starting off? The jobs have changed significantly because of the introduction of technology. How do they build resilience in their lives so that they remain relevant in the careers going forward? And you've done, that this is an area of interest for you a lot, because how do people balance their life under these trying circumstances?
I think I would answer this question from an internal and an external perspective, because I think, Sanjay, a lot of organizations also need to reinvent themselves as employers, right? I mean, we cannot expect our teams also to have straight-jacketed careers, right? So we should be open for people to move not only vertically, but horizontally, which would mean that if you're today hiring a colleague from, let's say, supply chain into sales, you should know that he or she would not have negotiation skills, right? So as an organization, you invest in that and give that opportunity internally. I mean, this has always been something which has been talked about in corporates, but honestly, I've seen very little, openness between functional heads to experiment. And if we don't experiment and learn as organizations internally, then we don't even upskill our teams. So it's also about that you should provide an opportunity to upskill, and you should give that opportunity to your colleagues. I mean, from an external point of view also, when we are hiring from outside, because not all talent is available, internally, I would say that personally, I do hire people for a lot of passion and zeal, and sometimes not only what's there on the resume, because the circumstances would have been really difficult for people who have moved between cities, countries, and functions. You should be able to pinpoint. I mean, you can do your psychometrics and all the tests, but you should be able to completely pinpoint that the intention and the zeal of the person to learn and upskill is higher, and then provide the opportunity, because it may not be that everybody understands what they require to upskill. Maybe those professional courses are not even available to upskill, right? It's different between education and experience. And then when you reach the organization for a role, they may not still deem you fit, because for a decade you were in finance, but you now want to be in supply chain, because those are the most options available in today's times, let's say, because that's probably one of the new verticals which is coming up in terms of demand. So I think as an organization, as employers, as managers, we have to be open to the idea of experimenting. We have to be open to giving people opportunities, not doubt when people take breaks. I mean, it can be for maternity, it can be for family, and somebody would have lost their job to COVID, right? And does not have a job till now for 1.5 years. do not start with doubting on the, let's say the competence, but actually give the benefit that it can be circumstantial. And you know what, if the person is not good anyways, whatever the resume may be starring, shining, will still not perform. And in the end, create that culture of trust and belonging for any incumbent. And I can say, Sanjay, that I'm really proud of the way organization like ours does this. I mean, with Great Place to Work in middle of pandemic, and in all the countries that we operate in, most of the countries that we operate in, I mean, it just goes to prove that the trust is mutual. So you have to do this as a long shot, can't be a short one.
Great thoughts. Siddharth, from your perspective, you're also seeing work becoming very, very different than what used to be. And the challenges that we all are facing are all very, very new for all of us. So for all these people, your organization has been great that it has taken an early call saying we will not let anybody go. But many people who have lost their jobs, who are finding that their industries have shrunk, what advice will you give to them as to how do they get ready for the next level of opportunities that they can prepare themselves for?
So Sanjay, I think what the last year and a half has shown us is that you need to be very agile on both as an employer and as an employee to look at the opportunity and address it quickly. So just to give you an example, that my message to people is that reskill yourself quickly. Don't wait. Continue to look for opportunities in your areas of current interest and experience, but also look at reskilling yourself and take advantage of this setback to your career or to your life by looking at it as an opportunity to reskill. I see a lot of people who have moved from what I would say blue collar mechanized jobs into more tech driven service jobs. They've taken that. I mean, there is an engineer who took on driving an auto rickshaw. It was a necessity, but I think it also will give benefit to people to look at entrepreneurship as an opportunity, which they couldn't because they were in employment. I think it's also an opportunity to take advantage of the paradigm shift of what does employment mean. Employment doesn't mean that you have to come to office. Employment doesn't mean that you need to be co-located with your office. Employment doesn't mean that you have to work 9 to 5. So I think that sooner each of us absorbs what I would say, almost a permanent shift. So I don't think offices will go away totally, but the flexibility that people will have through reskilling, through work from anywhere, will allow them to have many more opportunities of their vocation, their profession than they did pre-pandemic. So I think in summary, I would say look at it as this setback as an opportunity as opposed to a barrier in future growth. Sanjay, I'll also add one more dimension to it. I think it is brought forward for the current generation, whether you want to call them millennials or post that you have to look at careers and not jobs. And I think that's another mindset change, which is a positive mindset change. It is driven both by loss of opportunity as well as people being able to find their passions a little more easily in located closer to home. I think in our business, a lot of people went to their hometowns, right? Not everybody belongs to a metro city or a large city, and they can continue to do the same thing sitting there. And I think that's a fantastic outcome that has come from this shift in employers actually being far more open to work from anywhere. So flexibility at work has been replaced by work from anywhere, and I think that's a positive change that has come out of this.
Wonderful. Ashish, one of the most brilliant examples of resilience when I look at is the way you've taken your career move, coming from a highly successful organization to take up a challenge and disrupt your own life by looking at a turnaround story. You know, we all would want our lives to go on smoothly as much as it can. But you've taken this exciting challenge of coming to an organization, turning it around. Uh, what would your advice be for people to, especially, getting out of their comfort zone and trying new things? Because that's something which is definitely an ask for today's time. So you would probably be the best person to advise all of these people who have faced a challenging situation.
Uh, so, see, if you look at it, when I graduated some 27, 28 years back, uh, 95, 90% of the jobs which exist today never existed when, we were all passing out from our colleges. And, this is how we have seen the world evolve and change in front of our own eyes. And, I can imagine so many things happening, and, you know, and I have participated in many of those things, and it is so very exciting. So, one thing I've realized that, see, you can't protect jobs anywhere in the world, because, with change in technology, with change in economies, jobs will come and go. What you need to do is to protect people. What you need to do is to, give them good careers, give them good options. People should keep learning, and I always believe that, if you know something, leave it there and then try to learn something new, and not do what you already know, because that is how the technology is changing and how the world is changing around us. And if we keep doing what we know, uh, everybody would soon become obsolete, actually, because, and it is true for everyone. I think both the panelists also, if they introspect, they would also realize the same thing, that if they had if they kept doing the same thing for the last 20 years, they would have been out of the job market some 10 years back. And so people need to keep reinventing, keep, finding new things to do, new challenges, and that has to come from within, and that has to, there has to be an enabling atmosphere for people to learn. And most corporates want people to move around, have different roles, but, it's a risk which a corporate takes when it moves people around, when it rotates people across roles. And but most of them want to do it because it is also a test of their system, because if you can rotate people, it means your processes are in place, and, you have good systems in place. So my advice to all the youngsters who are listening to this and everybody is to keep challenging yourself, keep finding new things to do, don't be afraid. See, the job you are doing today would not exist tomorrow, so don't be dependent upon that job. Focus on a good career and good learning. And for all you know, the life cycle of jobs, would shrink from 10 years to 5 years to 3 years, god knows what. So this is the reality which, the faster we realize, the better it is for our careers.
Great. Thanks, Renu, Ashish, and Siddharth. Before we sign up, just some passing comments as advice to everyone who's listening in. Siddharth, if you can, give your comments to people, how to overcome these situations, little words of uh, encouragement for everybody who's listening in.
Certainly, the way I would put it is that every crisis brings an opportunity, and I'm taking the liberty of quoting Sir Winston Churchill, and and you can't let that opportunity go. So don't give up. Look to the future. There is a lot that can happen for you with a positive attitude and tenacity. Uh, Build a network. Focus on your career. Focus on your own growth, and this too shall pass.
Great thoughts. Ashish, uh, some passing comments.
Yeah, I think in today's it is extremely critical to develop good networks, and today, the technology allows you to stay in touch with so many of your friends, people, and for all you know, we need to be strong. We need to realize that only those people who gave me a definition of good luck, and he told me and that struck me quite hard actually. It goes like this: that there was an opportunity and I was ready for it, and that to me is good luck.
Sure. So Renu, any passing thoughts from you?
So, good luck comes to everybody. You just prepare for opportunities to come.
Great, Ashish. Renu, passing thoughts from you?
I think
Be prepared all the time.
I would say that there has to be a let's say a lean-in circle that we should all have. I mean, I agree with Siddharth when he said we should have a network. So if I look at it professionally, obviously having a network, an organization, your previous organization, the teams, the managers, the mentors that you have worked with. But on a personal front, I would say a very big circle of family and friends is really important, because in the end, when we talk about our lives, we can say that yes, work is a big part of it, and we talk about balances and all that. But I really want to urge everyone, I mean, men and women alike, because we do live mostly in nuclear families today. It's very important to have a circle to lean in, because that gives you a very big support system. It gives you emotional strength, mental strength. It gives you the courage to bounce back when you go through adversity. And you should always have people to talk to. It's very important from my point of view. So a part of resilience is also about having that circle that you can rely on. It does not matter about the number of people. It really matters about who you can trust and who you can pour your heart out on, right? And similarly, be available to listen. I mean, we are all very busy in our digital gadgets, and it's really important, I mean, for children, family, friends, to be available to also listen to when they need you the most. That's really important from the whole scenario that we are witnessing. And also, this gives you a lot of time, because we are not on our planes or traveling, and probably not going to work every day and working remotely, to study, invest more on developing new skills. While we can say that upskilling is organization and individual responsibility both, but then finding your passions. I mean, picking up sports, even if it's individual, if it's safe to go outside. Picking up anything that you have probably missed on for a hectic life that you had as a professional. So do that. Pursue something which is outside your work, reading, sports, anything, that cooking. So it's not gender based anymore. So any of that, right? But then pick up a hobby, pick up a passion, connect with friends, family, colleagues, upskill yourself, and be available to do anything that comes your way, any opportunity. I mean, in terms of people who are looking out for jobs, but also internally to be able to stretch to a project, to put in your skills to a team, be ready for the new challenge, be ready for a new experience. That's what I would say.
Great. Thank you very much, for this wonderful discussion. Great takeaways for me, at least, and some of the things that have really stuck for me are, the concept of belief in yourself, the trust that you can do it, the commitment to the purpose, and courage to step out and do something, new. I really liked also, the concept of tenacity and consistency of behavior, which is essential for all of us to survive in this ever-changing world. I think this concept of managing uncertainty with reliability and having systems and processes which can help us predict, and prepare us for any kind of eventualities as they emerge, so that we are ready to face those challenges and come out on top. I also like the idea of supporting entrepreneurship. I hope people hear this message and give opportunity to smaller entrepreneurs, smaller organizations which are trying to make their mark and coming out of these struggling times. That's a great thought, and I hope many organizations try this out. And also the fact that, we can't change the situation, and hence converting this crisis into opportunity and trying new things, which can probably lead to a new career for any of us. I love the fact that, this crisis has taught us the importance of people in our lives. All of us who've been living as, nuclear families, as Renu mentioned. But yes, this is the opportunity for us to build our networks so that we can fall back on them whenever there is a need that arises. So thank you very much, all of you. And I hope all of you enjoyed this session. If you need any other information from us, you can always reach out to us through our website, www.thinknoblehouse.com. Thanks, everyone. And we look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.